Thank you for tuning in to another episode of our weekly mock draft best ball stream hosted on Underdog Fantasy. I'm Dave Kluge, and today I am joined with, I feel comfortable saying this, Justin, and I don't know if you feel comfortable accepting this title, but in my opinion, you, Justin Herzig, are the best ball player on the planet, the only person ever to make the finals in all four best ball manias. You took it down a few years ago, and this is still, kind of a newer format for me. I've been playing redraft for 20 plus years, been playing Dynasty for almost a decade. This is my third year really diving into the weeds of best ball. So what I like doing is surrounding myself with smarter people so I can be a sponge and absorb as much as possible. That's why I've got you on today, hoping we can talk through some game theory, talk through your draft strategy a little bit, and just get that much sharper as we head into the 2024 season.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And hey, last couple of years, I've been doing the exact same thing over at ETR and bringing on a lot of people from the industry and trying to kind of cover hey, you have some really smart people who are at the game theory, the strategy aspect, and you have the ones who are great at the rookies, great at the player takes, great at the projections, and seeing what I can kind of get bits and pieces from everyone. And so I'm fully aligned to what you're doing. Appreciate the kind words, and let's get to it.
And I think the first thing that I learned my first year really playing best ball and diving into it is the player takes don't really matter all that much. I planted some flags on players that I was really, really bullish on, entered the season at 50, 60% exposure on some of these players. One of those players being Chris Carson, who got injured and just absolutely nuked my entire season, lit my entire bankroll on fire. So I've kind of learned to be a little bit more agnostic when it comes to player takes and just, building out the roster based on where these players fall. And this is a big week for us. We just got the schedule released, so now we could actually look at the week 17 correlation a little bit. I know that's something that you put quite a bit of weight into. So let's kind of talk through that. Oop.
Sounds good. Looks like if you do have this issue, you can just enter on your phone. I've had this happen once or twice before. Just enter on your phone and then you'll still be able to draft on there. But schedule released. So hopefully everyone here has their week 17 matchups memorized. If not, I've got some flashcards. You can go on my Twitter. I tweeted that out. Now that we have the schedule, we can start getting a bit we can get a bit more kind of strategic in how do we plan for that week 17 where really all the cash is. And some people are like, no, I want to plan for week 16 because I want to make sure I make it to week 17. We can get through that debate as well. But I think at the end of the day, you mentioned the player takes things. I think that's pretty interesting because in a small sample size, the player takes like Tank Dell. If you were Oliver, you had 100% of him last year, you would have been absolutely smash pick. Your advance rate would be really high, but come playoff times, you lost one of your best players. And so it's not to say that you shouldn't have drafted Tank Dell, but we still end up like it's difficult to overcome one of your better players. And so, that hurts you a lot. So I still think player takes are massively important, but for people who feel like, you know what, I'm not the greatest at player takes, I'm willing to trust some other people, and people have differing player takes. So there's still so much you can do to kind of master this game with regards to strategy aspect, roster construction, stacking, those things that we can have more increased confidence and maybe less randomness or variance from a player perspective.
Yeah. And I think what I've done at this point, and I don't know if you're the same, for the first 3 rounds, I'm basically okay just auto drafting. I don't want to plant any flags early because that has bitten me in the past. So maybe I've skewed too far in the opposite direction. I'm okay just kind of letting the value fall to me in the first 3 rounds. And then based on how that value falls, whether I go wide receiver heavy, running back heavy, that kind of changes my approach for the rest of the draft. I also want to thank you for just kind of taking the wheel there as I was working through those technical difficulties. But we are in this draft now, just waiting. We got a few spots left to fill here. So if you're watching and you want to hop in, feel free to do so. But would you say that's kind of your approach as well? First few rounds, just kind of taking what falls to you?
Yeah, so I would say first round, I completely agree. And I think a lot of it becomes for me, how do I want to kind of approach a draft? And so in that first round, I think you've got strong running backs, you've got strong wide receivers. I'm pretty content with anyone there. And that's where I agree with you. Even if I have, Puka projected as a better player than Bijan or something, at the end of the day, those margins are so tiny, especially that high in the draft, that if you're going to have some level of conviction and go one or the other just from a player take, it's probably not the sharpest. However, when we get to the second and third round, I think then it's not so much of having strong player takes from a individual between wide receivers or running backs, but it's more of how do you want that draft to go? Because if you were to say you took Bijan and you took Breece Hall in the first, and now another running back falls to you in the second, I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan this year of like starting running back. I think like wide receivers, when you get past the kind of 7th or 8th round, it's just really strong drop off. And I do like a lot of the later running backs. So for me, I'm not as willing to just let the ADP fall to me, because I really want to make sure that like, hey, I'm focused on these structures. These are the pockets of the drafts where I see positional value, or I see some kind of overspending on various positions and it gets you stuck in a weird spot later on.
Yeah, I think kind of the one that jumps out to me in the first round that I think is flip flopped. I prefer Amon-Ra St. Brown, knowing that he's got the safety of Jared Goff, to Justin Jefferson. But if I do that, I'm going to end up with a lot of exposure to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm not going to have any Justin Jefferson. And then, God forbid, Amon-Ra St. Brown gets injured. Justin Jefferson proves he's quarterback proof. I've just sunk, 1 in 6 of my drafts, essentially. So, the other question I'll have as we're waiting for this to fill, just 2 spots left here. Do you have a draft slot that you like? Talked about this with Pete Overzet last week. I've done about 20 of these Best Ball Mania drafts so far, and I think I really like the top 4. Not only are you kind of guaranteeing that you're getting one of those top 4 players, but I really like the value that you're getting at the 2-3 turn. I feel like once you get to that 3-4 turn, you're really in the weeds and just kind of taking something you don't feel too great about.
Yeah, from a pure math perspective, this is the answer every single year. Like, number 1 is the clear kind of best from projection pick, because of 1, the gap between 1 and 2 is usually larger than 2 to 3, which is larger than 3 to 4, which is larger than 199 to 200. Like, the earlier in the draft, you have the larger gap. So it makes sense that that first player is the best. The second is when you are on a turn, you have the guarantee, have the ability to kind of lock in a stack without it getting sniped. Like, if you have that second or third pick, and maybe in the 4th round, you want to grab either Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, or Lamar, but you're like, okay, if I grab one, what if the person in pick 1 actually then grabs Lamar, or maybe takes both or something, and I get locked out? And so look at that, and you get the 1.01 there.
How about it? They must have been listening to us.
Yeah, but I think that's also like the cop-out answer. I mean,
last year, for example, I think the best and strongest builds I had came at the end of the first round. And it just so happened because that's where Amon-Ra St. Brown and CeeDee Lamb were going. And if you were able to start with Amon-Ra and CeeDee, I don't know if there was a better 1-2 start to your draft last year.
Yeah, that's very fair. And that's what I was going to say as well for this year. I feel like there's a large drop off in the second round, in around the middle of the second round. For me, I actually think I often am going for the wide receivers in the second round. So that's kind of like the Drake London, the Marvin Harrison, the Devontae, and the Olave. And so if I miss out on those, I don't love grabbing the running backs, especially not early second and early mid second. And so that's where it's like, if I'm not at the 1, I don't mind being in that kind of 10, 11, 12 spot, because I can go with a really strong start. That is pretty similar to, all right, there's our 1.01. Obviously CMC. And even if you think that CeeDee Lamb is the better pick than CMC here, it's exactly what you were saying. If you're going to choose Lamb over CMC, then you're getting no exposure to CMC. And that's just not the way you want to kind of set your portfolio up.
And honestly, I've got Tyreek Hill in the same bucket. Like, these guys are like 1 A, B, and C for me, but you got to play ADP at this point. I'm not trying to plant a flag this early in the draft. Now, once you take Christian McCaffrey, number 1 overall, with our next picks at the 2-3 turn, which I got to say, for the sake of content, I really like when we do this, when you get to pick at the turn, because it gives us so much more to talk about in between picks where we're kind of double tapping. Are you ever looking at running backs at the 2-3 turn, or are you almost exclusively trying to push for a wide receiver, or a wide receiver tight end when you get to that 2-3 turn? I'll slow down a little bit just so everybody can kind of see who will be picking, who will hopefully be falling to us at those picks.
This year, with me drafting CMC first and the running backs that are available, I don't think there will be a time that I will be drafting any of these running backs with that one. If you scroll up a little, you have guys like Saquon and JT that I think have ADPs of like 14 and 16.
And if they slip somehow, I guess you're entertaining that, right?
And here's the thing. Like, I actually don't like Saquon or JT at all. I don't have them in my top 24. I think, we can go into the actual reasons, but I just don't think they're actually great picks. However, if one of those was to fall down to the CMC, and especially if we're talking August where we know that combo hasn't been available, that's when, just to get a unique combo, because, let's say that can we scroll up a tiny bit? What is JT and Saquon's ADP right now? It's 15 and 16.
Yep.
The chance that they fall and you get a CMC, my guess is we're going to see, if they stay there, 2 to 4% of teams have those as a combo. even though I don't like that build, even though I don't like those players, I'm willing to say, you know what? I'm just getting a very unique combo. I might be the only team, one of the very few teams in the week 17 that have these two. And if they go off, it's worth it. So that's why I'd really veer, but it's from a kind of game theory aspect rather than strong take.
Now, another question I have, when you're picking at the turn, players are less likely to fall to you. Like, it's hard to kind of look at the board and say, well, I'm going to take this guy now and hope that I can get this guy with my next pick. So are you willing to stray from ADP a little bit stronger when you're picking at the turns, knowing that there's, a 24 pick gap in between the next time you get to choose player?
Yeah, and so first from let's just go from a high level reaching on ADP. The way that I kind of think about it is the earlier in the draft, the less likely I am to reach because the ADP is more efficient. We are better at projecting the difference between player 60 and 70 than we are later on in the draft when they're between 160 170 is really pretty much a coin flip 51-49. And so as I get later in the draft, I'm more willing to say, you know what, I'm going to reach because I want this stack partner. I want to reach because this is what I need for this build. There's a strong teardrop at this position. I don't want to miss out. So I'm more okay with it. Early on in the draft, this early in the offseason, I'm probably not willing to reach because you know that you're giving up this immediate ADP value aspect. And we don't know that maybe later on in the summer, that player is going to fall a bit and you can actually still get that CMC combo with whoever that is, but they're getting it 2 rounds later. Now, if we get to August and we see hey, at no point has someone who's being drafted at the 4 or 5 turn, which is over on this side of the board, if they've stayed there the entire time, maybe I'm okay with reaching at them for over with when I had the CMC because no one else has that combination. Right. So while I'm giving up some ADP value, I'm also gaining some uniqueness and I have more confidence that that uniqueness is going to stay unique because it's later on in the summer.
Well, there we saw it. Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley just went off the board back-to-back at 19 and 20, and they were starting to slide. So I was wondering if maybe one of those guys would fall to us at 24 after we just discussed it. But I really like this group of wide receivers right here. I've seen myself drafting a lot of Debo. Obviously, you talk about a lot about stacking, correlating. What do you think about taking the same running back and wide receiver from the same team immediately with your first and second picks?
Yeah, so I would not do the Debo or the Ayuk here for 2 core reasons. One is it's just so popular. People, okay, so I guess if we wanted to pick first, we're in a bit of a the guys that I like are definitely Waddle. And then
do we like Laporta here? Because then we're getting that week 17 correlation with the San Francisco and Detroit game, or is that just a little too early?
You are. And so that's an interesting one. And because it's just so early for me. I think Laporta is already crazy expensive.
I agree. And I'd rather wait for McBride or.
And I think we're going to start seeing more people picking that. So Laporta may actually move up a couple spots. For me, I would go with Malik Neighbors here. And I'll explain why in a second because we're okay, so ADP wise.
Well, I will say real quickly, when we had Pete Overzet on last week, we were picking from the 3rd spot.
Okay.
And when we got to this area picking near the turn, we both said those are our 2 favorite players, Waddle and Neighbors. I mean, they're just the upside is there, and that's what you're looking for is guys on Neighbors might not be in a good offense, but he's a rookie with tremendous upside that could pull 35% target share his rookie season. And then we know what Waddle can do when he's healthy. I want to hear your takes on both of these players, though.
Yeah, and so I mean, and the Neighbors aspect, we expect them to be peaking come playoff time. And rookies getting maybe it's actually even Drew Lock is better for him. Who knows? But that's what we're looking from a rookie standpoint, and all the talent in the world. Waddle, I think, being attached to a very strong offense. I think last year people are kind of overweighting his lack of success. He had the injuries, just didn't work out. I want to bet more on that. Hey, this Daniels offense, just very strong, explosive. Love Waddle. Now, one of the reasons why, so back to the San Francisco thing with the Debo, because, hey, I do like Debo, but I think Debo and Christian McCaffrey in a 1-game sample size actually inversely correlate. The way that kind of Debo wins actually, kind of differs from the way that Christian McCaffrey, their best games have been when they're not actually in the field together. But a lot of
almost
people
like handcuffing in a way, they play such similar roles in the offense.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think a lot of people are just oh, San Francisco, let me grab the San Francisco guys. And because Ayuk and Debo are there, it's going to be a very common, popular owned one. And but I don't think it's worth kind of giving up that uniqueness aspect.
Yeah, complete in agreement there. Back to Waddle. I just did a deep dive, and this is from a dynasty aspect, but Waddle has had one of the most interesting like 3-year starts of his career. Because if you look year one, he was a target hog and he had all the usage metrics we wanted to see, like a 30% target share player, just getting obscene usage, and all of that was coming near the line of scrimmage. And then we saw Tyreek Hill come into the picture, which obviously negatively impact his ability to draw targets. Then we saw his target share and usage fall off a cliff, but his ADOT and his efficiency spiked in year two. And then year three, we saw that all kind of balance out where the efficiency dropped a little bit, the target share went up a little bit, but he was just injured. So I feel like what I like about Waddle is we know that he can do it all. He can be a high usage player. He could be a high efficiency player. And I feel like we haven't even seen the ceiling outcome yet because we've kind of seen the two polar extremes on each end. Last year should have been the year that we saw it all come together, but he was just so hampered with injuries. So I think Waddle is one of the best values in drafts right now. So happy we were able to get him. And like I said, we didn't want to force it, but I think this is what you want to do when you're starting with Chris McCaffrey at 101. Go with wide receiver at the next picks. So we're coming up in a little bit here. Rather than scrambling as we're on the clock, let's kind of talk through some players we would be eyeing that we might like here. So we're going to be up at 48, 49. Obviously, same thing. If these running backs slide, Josh Jacobs or Travis Etienne all the way there, we'd probably be entertaining one of them. But who are some guys you like picking here? I've been not forcing it, but when it falls to me at the 4-5 turn, my favorite thing to do is Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. We don't always get that lucky, but that's my favorite thing to do at the 4-5 turn.
Yeah, I like that. One of the things I've been saying for this year thus far is I want to leave every draft with a top 7 tight end. I think that there is a very strong tier drop after that. And then a few rounds later, there's an even stronger tier drop where if you don't grab them by the Dalton Schultz aspect, like it is a wasteland.
So when you say top 7, just so we're on the same page, that's Ingram and Kittle, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Right.
Those are the final 2 ones. Now, if you drafted Jalen Hurts, if you drafted Dak Prescott, and you want to say, hey, I'm going to stretch a little, I'm going to grab Ferguson, I'm going to grab Goddard, I think that's okay as well. But for the most part, I think there is a strong cut at that kind of Ingram and Kittle aspect. And so when you get the chance, as you just said, like the Lamar, Mark Andrews, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you don't get the Mark Andrews, I think let's click on tight end. I think it's a bit of a reach on Pitts. Kincaid already went. So if we didn't get Mark Andrews, then I wouldn't reach for the Pitts one, because where we are right now, you can also probably get a Kittle at the next one or an Ingram.
And Kittle and McCaffrey don't have that same inverse correlation we talked about. Lamar Jackson goes off the board there, so that kind of ruins our hopes of getting that Baltimore stack. But does anything else jump out to you? I mean, it was just a couple of weeks ago you were lucky enough to get Mahomes and Kelsey at this turn. That is no longer happening. So do you want to get Andrews without Lamar, or are you looking elsewhere here? I think T. Higgins is a great value. I'm okay just taking him, but I want to hear your
T. Higgins. So I think we can start off with that. Love grabbing wide receiver at this spot as well. Also sets us up to get a Joe Burrow later on, which is ADP. Falls about into this range, and that's a kind of QB that I enjoy, bringing on the team. And then, I think Mark Andrews as well. I think Mark Andrews is still a great standalone value at this spot. Gives you that kind of weekly upside that we've seen. He's still a kind of 1A, 1B in that Ravens offense. Last year, when I think about the Ravens offense, because of the way that they're, kind of things just unfolded with so many of these short Gus Edwards touchdowns and how strong their defense was, you really didn't need to see the pass-heavy Money Monken offense that we expected until kind of the end of the season. You think of the Miami game, you think of kind of those later games. This year, I would not be shocked if Baltimore ends up being kind of the breakout from a passing game that we didn't, that we kind of were hoping for last year, but didn't fully see.
But just want to interject real quickly. Like you said, we did see it down the end of the stretch, down the stretch at the end of the season. And I think there's this idea that a new offensive coordinator comes in and we're just going to see explosions week one. And that's not how it goes. It takes time to instill these new offenses and for everybody to get familiar with the new concepts. And I'm really intrigued by what we saw at the end of the year. So I'm absolutely willing to go back to the well with this Ravens offense too.
Yeah, I love that. Great points there. And when we think what did they do in the offseason? They drafted Devontae Walker. They re-signed Rashad Bateman. Lost Odell Beckham. It's very clear. It's Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. That's who this passing game is going to run through. Yes, I'd love to see a step up from Bateman. I was a fan of Devontae Walker from a prospect standpoint, but at the end of the day, best case scenario, those guys are the clear number 3. And so, yeah, happy to take Mark Andrews. I think the Isaiah Likely thing is, not going to eat into Andrews's volume.
I will say though, when I do take that kind of late round tight end approach, likely is a guy I'm willing to draft just because, as we saw, if there's the contingent upside there, where if Andrews goes down, you're basically getting 1-to-1 replacement. So I do like that quite a bit. See Chad Parsons in the chat, Mark Andrews, wide receiver 1. Yeah, I think that's kind of the way, what we're going to see. Zay Flowers showed some flashes last year, but I have much more faith in Mark Andrews than I do in Zay Flowers, and you're getting him with the tight end designation. Now, this is what a lot of my builds have looked like so far as we head into round 6. 3 wide receivers, a running back, and a tight end. You feel nice and safe when you have this. Like you got your good tight end. We know this is a year where you can really wait on quarterbacks. Like you said, Justin Herbert's going later, and we're open for that. Last week, Pete and I actually double tapped kind of the elite tight ends because Evan Ingram fell to us. That did leave us scrambling for wide receivers, and we didn't feel too great about our wide receiver room. So, you live and you learn. And probably wouldn't do that again unless somehow Kittle fell, but Kittle just went off the board. So again, this is where running backs start to warm up for me a little bit. I do like this range of running backs, but there's also some good receivers here. Who are you looking at? We're up at about 5 picks. Who jumps out to you on this board currently?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is when running backs, it's like tempting, but this is also, for me, the end of a tier drop in wide receivers.
Mhm.
And so after kind of for me, it's like DeAndre Hopkins standpoint, I think it really cuts down. I mean, it drops off at wide receiver, while running backs between rounds like 8 to 11, you have ambiguity and role. You have like questions, but you have substantial upside. Zach Moss, Chase Brown, we don't really know what's going to happen there, but like if one breaks out as the running back for Cincinnati, that's huge. So like that's where I'm like, you know what? I'm okay waiting another round or two to get my running backs because I can just stack up a bunch in that area and really let me lock in the wide receivers because I do not mind having 5 wide receivers through 7-8 rounds. All that said, yes, Burrow there. That's definitely the clear target. If we can make
a little liberty in queuing him up. I thought that was kind of who we'd be looking for here. Who are the wide receivers that jump out to you? I mean, I like Roma Dunze. I like Keon Coleman. I like Chris Godwin. We're basically guaranteed one of those guys at this point. Scrolling down a little bit further, I like Jackson Smith-Njigba as well. I like Deontay Johnson, but I'm not sure how far you're willing to reach on ADP here.
Yeah, Godwin would be my guy. I think it's pretty crazy in these 2 picks, I'm happy with the Burrow Godwin. Godwin and Mike Evans year over year have been both being drafted around like that kind of 5th, 6th round. Last year was the real big from a performance on the field that we saw the differentiation. Baker Mayfield comes in, Dave Canales is there. And so like how much of that was, yes, there's a strong connection rapport between Mike Evans and Baker, 1,000 yards each year, 13 touchdowns, whatever it was. Godwin wasn't really playing the role he was comfortable with. They had him more outside. This year, it sounds like from all reports, he's going to move a bit more into the slot, and they're going to put either McMillan or Trey. I'm forgetting who the rookie from last year was.
Trey Palmer?
Yeah, Trey Palmer, I think, is like, we'll figure out who that other's going to play in that side. But this gives Godwin that slot role that I think is highly valuable. And for just, going to rack up those targets. He still is I think 27, I would guess.
Yeah, I think he just turned 28, but I mean, he's still young and he's got that. He just turned 28 years old, but he's got that skill set where he's going to age gracefully. Like he's a good route runner. He doesn't win with physicality. So I have no concerns about Godwin's age whatsoever.
Yep. Still very strong talent. And so that's where I think Godwin, he probably doesn't have the sexiness of the picks around him, like the ones that, hey, maybe Keon Coleman can have the upside. Maybe the, Rome was drafted right before him. But I think he is just a very strong play. And if you look at ETR ranks, he's one that we're very higher than market on.
Yeah. And I'm looking, last year, he ran over 60% of his routes came from out wide, which is not what we want to see. If you go back to 2019, when he had that 1,300-yard season, he was running primarily out of the slot. So we've heard that they want to make that switch. 63% of his snaps in 2019 came out of the slot. So they've talked about making that switch, and we know that's when he plays his best ball. So I'm very bullish on Godwin as well. I'm a bit higher on him in my rankings. I'm happy you wanted to go with him because I was afraid that might have been a little bit of a reach at ADP, but I'm glad we were in agreement there. Big fan of Godwin and what we can expect from him this year. And Baker, like surprisingly good, was able to keep that offense afloat. There were a lot of concerns about what it would look like in the post Tom Brady era, but I've got no concerns going into 2024.
And one of the things I'm also thinking about when I'm taking that wide receiver is we're going to obviously draft a second quarterback. We probably want to make this a 2 QB team because we drafted Burrow as like our kind of, our number one. So thinking through like, okay, Baker is a pretty solid number 2 there. If we would have gone with DeAndre Hopkins, are you comfortable with just Burrow and Levis? Like that's a little rougher. So like that might, think of this as like a slight lean towards who do I pick in that area? Same thing. Like, maybe you like Deontay Johnson, but then like, are you comfortable with your number 2 and only number 2 QB being Bryce Young? Like, I don't love that. Or you're saying I'm going Burrow and 2 very late ones, which also maybe that's a fine strategy, but like start thinking through these things when you're making the pick now.
So as we're coming up here in a few picks, this is, I think a real sweet spot for running backs. I like Zach Moss. I like James Conner. I know a lot of people are out on Tony Pollard. I'm still willing to draft Tony Pollard. I think that last year's disappointment is baked into his ADP, and I'm willing to take him here. I want to thank you last year because I was completely out on Raheem Mostert until you talked me into Raheem Mostert on your show, and I got some late offseason shares that really, really helped me. But who jumps out to you at this point?
All right. Zach Moss would have been a great one
He's
because of
gone.
our
Yeah.
Cincy stack just went there. Can you just click on run? Because I do agree. This is definitely where we're going to grab running back, and I think probably 2 of them. Yep, Pollard is probably my top one, and then probably Trey Benson. I'm trying to think of correlation real quick as we go through Cincy Denver. So maybe you could reach Javonte instead of Benson. I kind of like that now.
We'll let Pollard auto pick and then give us a little bit of time here.
You go.
I am of the mindset I
Yep.
much prefer waiting for Jaleel McLaughlin later in drafts than reaching for Javonte, but I understand it here. I like Trey Benson. I think we see these rookie running backs rise all the time. So I've been drafting a lot of Trey Benson right now just because I think he's mispriced. And again, I try not to get too much into player takes, but I think Trey Benson should be a 6th or 7th round pick, and I like him here. I'm okay with either of those guys, Benson or Williams. This is your show today. You make the pick. Let us know who you want.
Yeah, and I think that's just a good example where, so let's go Javonte. But I think your arguments for Trey Benson over Javonte make a lot of sense. But if you're going to not be willing to choose Javonte when you have that week 17 game stack, then you're never going to end up with him. And this is a great way to then diversify the portfolio. Because I agree with you. I think like Trey Benson makes a lot of sense. And across my portfolio, I'll probably end up with more Trey because of those reasons. But this is the way that I kind of get that diversification where we have Cincinnati as our primary stack. We have Burrow, we have Higgins. We may grab Yoshi or Burton later on. And we're going to want some kind of bring back on the Denver side. And now when we think through, like, sure, you could reach on the Jaleel McLaughlin, maybe the Samaje Perine, maybe the Audric Estime, but or like one of the wide receivers. But this is one where it fits the build. It fit the position we were looking for right now. And I can give some pretty strong arguments for Javonte Williams. We have a Sean Payton as the new coach. We have Bo Nix as a quarterback. Those 2 are the most extreme at passing to running backs. We saw Bo Nix doing it with small checkdowns. We've seen Sean Payton with the Alvin Kamara. Now, the question is...
You could also just make the argument that you could just kind of throw away last year for Javonte because he was coming off that horrendous knee injury.
Yep.
We might not even have seen the true Javonte last year.
Exactly. So another year removed from the ACL. And will Javonte be the pass catcher in that offense? We don't know. But that's why he's being drafted at, ADP 105. If he ends up being that pass catcher, he's got the opportunity to be a top, a 3-4 round pick next year.
So another guy I want to throw out there, and I mentioned his name because you sold me on him last year, Raheem Mostert. We've got Waddle in this build. Does that would that have prioritized? I noticed you didn't even mention his name. Are you just kind of out on Mostert this year at the cost, or just curious why we glossed over him?
Yeah, mostly out on him. I believe that Jalen Wright was drafted to be his eventual replacement. And, when we're thinking about prioritizing the end of season, that's when 32-year-old Raheem Mostert, it's not as necessary. And I believe
the 14th round was great. This year, in the 8th, 9th round, not so great.
And last year, Jeff Wilson was the other one. And I really wasn't a big Jeff Wilson fan. I ended up with pretty much none of him. And Devin Achane was a rookie. So like Raheem Mostert, now you've got a rookie and you've got a guy I don't care about, Jeff Wilson. This year you have Devin Achane, sophomore, explosive, most dynamic player in the NFL from a running back, probably, and a new rookie. So, and then age 32, Raheem Mostert. So I think the I don't know, the argument for him last year isn't as strong as it is this year. I think there's some other kind of yellow red flags. But yeah, if you wanted to go Miami with hey, maybe we're going to go Miami, it's just not that great in my mind.
I get it. So let's walk through the team real quickly. We got Joe Burrow quarterback stacked with T. Higgins. Our running back room right now: Christian McCaffrey, Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams. Wide receivers: Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors, like I mentioned, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, and then a naked Mark Andrews at the tight end position. But I mean, we're at a point now where we're just going to continue hammering running back and wide receiver. We don't need another tight end for a few rounds. We've got a few options for quarterbacks a little bit later. Nobody jumps out to me here. So are you okay with me just flipping to running back and wide receiver here? Or are you thinking about maybe a quarterback or tight end?
So I wouldn't completely rule out someone like Tua because we do have that stack. Like, yeah, maybe we're a little more scared of playing at Cleveland in week 17. But we do have the Waddle aspect. That said, I agree with you. We do have other options later on. And this is where I really do like running back. So I'm not leaning Tua, but I would think like, okay, we're going to be fine with these guys. But if there wasn't a running back we liked, be okay with it. Also, I like Dallas Goedert here. Just like, hey, if you wanted to go with a Andrews Goedert, that's pretty strong, but yeah.
Now, I queued up Chase Brown. We missed out on Zach Moss earlier. Do you think this is a good time to take Chase Brown, or he's a player I like, but that ADP does scare me a little bit.
I'm good with it here too. I think it fits in with our build, explosiveness. We're good with that. I'm just using the time to think through Goddard or Tajay for the next one. I think our running back, because we have McCaffrey, I think we're kind of strong at running back, throwing the Chase Brown here. I don't mind doing like a Pollard and Tajay and, hey, similar to I did Achane and Mostert last year.
Right.
But Goddard.
I'm fine with Goddard or Spears.
I like Goddard here.
And this is a nice value fall. We got him about a round below ADP. So we're good on tight ends. I'm A-okay with that pick as well. And Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears have been tough for me because I like both of them this year. And I don't know what this running back room is going to look like. The weird thing is, like, a lot of times you can kind of envision what a running back room is going to look like, right? Like, we know Javonte Williams is probably going to get the early down work with maybe some passing work sprinkled in. Jaleel McLaughlin's going to come in on third and long and in the hurry up offense. If you look at Baltimore's room, we know that it's going to be Derrick Henry getting the early down and goal line work. Again, I could talk about all these different rooms, but when it comes to Tennessee, I just have no idea what to expect. Like, these guys have pretty much the same exact skill set, and I don't know how touches are going to be split up. I like the contingent upside for either of them if one goes down, but I'm afraid there's just going to be a 50-50 split down the middle with everything. Goal line work, passing down work, and it's going to be really tough weekly to know what to expect.
Yeah. And so let's do a comparison between the Bengals guys and the Titans guys. I think it's pretty similar situations where we could see either any of the four being the outright kind of lead back on their team. We could see situations where it's a 60-40 on either team. Completely fair, ambiguous situations. The difference is for the Bengals are a team that's projected to win, I think, 10.5 games, while the Titans are 6.5. So when you're correct on the Bengals one and you pick the right guy, or if you get the 60-40, like especially on Underdog where it's so TD dependent, like you're on a team that's a really strong team. We then look at the Titans, and the Titans have a win total of 6.5. Will Levis, we don't know if he's actually any good. They've invested a decent amount in this passing game because they want to give Will Levis like all the kind of chances. I guess if you count bringing Calvin Ridley an expensive contract, giving him all the chances. And they brought in Tyler Boyd too. So like, even when we're right on picking the right Titan, it's still a 6.5 win team. So that's where it's like, I'm more likely to default to Zach Moss over Pollard, even though I think Pollard's a better talent. Chase Brown over Tajay, even though I think Tajay is a better talent.
Yeah, you're investing in a better offense. That totally makes sense. So with our next picks coming up here, I like the receivers that we have: Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin. But we definitely need some more depth here. We're going to need a QB too as well, but we're good on tight ends. When you have a running back room, I guess talk me through this. Do you think this is a strong running back room? Of course, you got Christian McCaffrey. Can't get better than that. Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams, Chase Brown, all guys that we drafted a little bit later, but all with tremendous upside. How many more running backs are you looking to add to a room like this?
Yeah, and I'm also looking at the roster construction, and we're done at tight end, and we're probably going to be done at QB with 2 QBs. So now
Right.
we've got a 2 on the 1, 2-2 out there, which gives us, we could go 2-7-7-2, 2-6-8-2, 2-5-9-2.
Mhm.
I don't like doing 2-4-10-2. So that immediately tells me I'm not going to end up with 2-4-10-2. So we're going to have at least one more running back. Now, whether it's 2-5-9-2 or 2-6-8-2 depends on when we draft these running backs. I think most likely 2-5-9-2 will end up being this build. But if we don't draft the running back until the 17th and 18th, sure, then we can go 2-6-8-2 and grab 2 at the very end.
So some of the quarterbacks that we'd be in play for, I mean, I guess Daniel Jones, if we really wanted to get gross with it. I'm not a big fan of drafting Daniel Jones, but sometimes it's good to draft those guys that everybody is completely out on. We talked about Baker. I think Baker is probably one of the best targets we can get. You know, you're getting high-end QB2, low-end QB1 production on a week-in, week-out basis. That's pretty much it. So we might be manufacturing some stacks at this point where we're
Well,
looking to grab players who can open us up for other quarterback options later on.
you are missing, if Tua falls to us, 2 more picks.
True.
One
Exactly.
more
Yeah.
pick. All we need is Mario here not to take Tua. I don't know if he has Tyreek or anyone else or what his situation is. But obviously we are taking Tua if he falls to us here.
He has no Miami. So hopefully this works out for us. And there he goes, Ty Chandler. So we get Tua
That's
here. I like that.
fantastic. Yeah.
And then we're done with quarterbacks. We're done with tight ends. Who would be the other guy that you'd like to take at this position?
Okay. Let's see. Washington, I think, is a pretty decent one there. Washington's also playing Atlanta. We don't have any Atlanta. John Dotson. It's a bit of a reach for Jermaine Burton.
We would deal with Troy Franklin if we want to bring back another Denver player along with Javonte.
I'd probably just go with the ADP with Jahan Dotson. You're getting that value there, a full round of value. And Jahan Dotson's not a guy I dislike.
Yeah. Again, another guy who showed some flashes his rookie year, has dealt with injuries since, but has a sky high ceiling. I feel like the thing with Jahan Dotson is you're kind of betting on 2 players. You're betting on Jayden Daniels being good, and you're betting on Jahan Dotson being good. But we know the talent's there with Jahan Dotson. Hasn't really translated to fantasy production yet, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
So again, we're just going to keep hitting running backs and wide receivers for the rest of this draft. I mean, I think we're strong enough at quarterback. Would you even entertain adding a QB3 to a build like this?
Definitely not at this point. Like if we would have grabbed Baker there, I probably still would have been fine with just Burrow Baker. If we didn't grab Baker, now we're talking maybe I mix in 2 late QBs, go with a 3 stack, because that's also the benefit of having 2 tight ends. Like I'm rarely going 3 at both onesies, but I'm very commonly going 2-3 or 3-2. But if we can do the 2-2, hey, we invested decent capital in both these positions, so I feel good with them. Feel good about, honestly, everything except our wide receivers are a little light. They're not bad, but they're lighter than I normally like. So that's where we're going to go heavy, and that 2-5-9-2 makes sense.
So when you start drafting wide receivers here, what is it that you are looking for? I think I know the answer to this, but I want to ask you, what is it that you're looking for in wide receivers when you're looking at a thin wide receiver room going into round 14?
Does it rhyme with Schmupside?
It sure does. Yeah. So we're going to be looking at a lot of rookies. We're going to be looking at a lot of unproven talents. Obviously, Jermaine Burton, I'm just going to cue him up because that would be a dream if he somehow falls to us, just to go with what we've already built with the Cincinnati stack. But who are some other guys in this areas of the draft that you think have pretty high upside?
Yeah, and so to think through, like if I'm going to do a 7 wide receiver build, which usually means that I invested 5, 6 in the first kind of 8, 9 rounds. Now that 7th one, you don't need to be like, oh, I need to go for the biggest upside, because you're having a fewer amount of people. Maybe you're looking for someone just going to give you a little more consistency, help you out in those kind of injuries, bye week, etc. The more you're going at a position, and this works for running back too, especially if you go 0 RB, but the more you're going to go with quantity at position, you really want to focus on the upside, because you're just getting enough dart throws and more added to say, hey, I want to hit the big game changer. And so in this scenario, what does upside actually mean? To be honest, we're really bad at actually evaluating it, other than when we can expect that there's a larger range of outcomes, wider variance for those players. That usually comes down to two things. One is we don't actually know that much about the player because they're a rookie, they haven't got play time, they're in a new role, whatever it is. And the second is there's a larger macro offensive unknown. And that comes with new offensive coordinators, new coaches. It comes with rookie quarterbacks that are coming in, and or a situation like Kirk Cousins going to a new team. So those unknowns lead to wider ranges of outcomes. Yes, it could really blow up in our face, but when you have 9 wide receivers and you're drafting late, who cares? I care about when it actually works out well.
Right. Now we've got the Cincinnati stack that we've built out, and we've got Javonte Williams kind of correlating with Week 17. Right now, we also have the Miami stack with Tua and Waddle. We don't have any Browns players, and there aren't really a lot of Browns players left. Jerry Jeudy's off the board at this point. I have been drafting Deonta Foreman in the 18th round. I think that if Nick Chubb can't get back up to speed, he can take a lot of that early down work. The only other guy is really Elijah Mitchell. So are you okay? Just kind of, or I'm sorry, Elijah Moore. Yeah. So
honestly, both those guys. Oh, Marvin Mims just went. That would have been a nice one because that would have been the bring back for the Bengals. Michael Wilson's ADP here, is a little
already
off.
Got Javonte. So who are we looking at here?
So Luke McCaffrey's not a bad one. If we just want to star that up, Bateman I like as well. It's basically saying like, hey, we're betting on Washington being better. We're betting at Baltimore being decent. Running backs are also a decent time to grab running backs here. I do like Bucky. We don't have any correlation with that.
Oh, we've got Godwin.
We'll grab McCaffrey. Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I forgot about that. I think we go with the Bateman.
That's where I'm at too. We've got Andrews. They're just investing in the passing game. And Bateman's another guy that, people have soured on him so much. And I feel like in our dynasty lens, we've already kind of pivoted that Bateman is worth a 3rd round pick and that his career is over. But Baltimore liked him enough to extend him this year. And he has just been in career plagued by injuries so far. But I think if Baltimore thought that he was a bust, they would have just simply let him walk after his rookie contract. They clearly see the upside there if they were willing to bring him back on a 3-year deal. So Bateman's a guy. Another one, we've got a lot of my guys in this draft so far, which, drafting with the spark guy like you, when you're picking a lot of the players that I like, it makes me feel pretty good. But Pollard's a guy that I've been investing in. Bateman's a guy that I've been investing in. And it just so happened that it worked out with these builds that we have.
Yeah. And with Baltimore, I mean, hey, they get that Houston Week 17 in the Dome, like potentially shootout game. Yes, Andrews could have a huge game. Bateman could also, especially because Bateman's got a player who can do it in, fewer amount of plays, more downfield, all of that. All right, so we have 3 more picks, and we're expecting that's going to be kind of 2 wide receivers, 1 running back in that situation, or we wait in a running back. It could be 2 running backs and 1 wide receiver. I don't feel locked into either, but
and at this point I couldn't care less about ADP. I'm just trying to get players that fit with my roster at this point. So yeah, Michael Wilson's sitting the top here. He doesn't really work with what we're trying to do. He's got some upside. If he falls, I might entertain him, but here I'm trying to get guys that work well. So like Deonta Foreman and Elijah Moore are guys that I'd probably queue up just to have them ready to go. Who are some other players that you kind of be thinking about making with these next picks?
Michael Wilson's also a falling ADP player, still reacting to the Zay Jones signing there. So his ADP from before is still kind of lagging. Right. This is where I probably would be. So I mentioned Bucky Irving. We have the Tampa correlation. I think he'd be a pretty decent pick here. And a lot of this is like me looking for just correlation aspects because there's not that much to really go off. I do like the Elijah Moore as a bring back for the Miami side of things.
Is Odell a guy that you're entertaining? I mean, we've got Tua and we've got Jalen Waddle. I saw you shaking your head, I think.
Well, no, to be honest, like this would be the only time I'd entertain it, right? Like, I don't think Odell is a good pick, but when you're having a Miami stack and it's the position you're looking for as wide receiver, I think it's completely fair.
So we're up in just a couple picks here. Do you think it's too early for Elijah Moore? Too early for Deonta Foreman? I think we want to get one of those guys, but I think that we could confidently say one of those 2 has probably fallen to us in the 18th.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever too early, as you're saying, because at ADP at this point, like the difference really just doesn't matter much to me.
Right. So up with the next pick here. Odell, Elijah Moore, Deonta Foreman, all on the board, but we've also got, if we're just looking for better all-around players, J.K. Dobbins, Demario Douglas, Dameon Pierce, who kind of works with what we've got as well with Baltimore, if we wanted to go that route. Who are you taking here?
I think I would go with J.K. Dobbins, someone who I do not have much of.
Ooh, all right.
But I don't post
Hey, you
more
don't have to sell
recently.
me on J.K. Dobbins, all right? I'm a sucker for this guy every offseason. I've been trying not to this offseason, but at that cost, why not?
Yeah, right. At that cost, we're getting so late on it. And position of need. And I think I can, if we're only doing 5 running backs, I'd rather it be J.K. Dobbins than Deonta Foreman.
So we got 10 seconds left here. Is it Odell or Moore? Is this one of the guys we're taking?
I'd probably go Odell for the full stack, for the stack correlation, more than Elijah Moore, which is more of just a kind of week 17. So that's a good
surprise me if
discussion
Elijah
point.
Moore makes it to us in the 18th. He's a guy that I've seen go undrafted
usually does.
a lot. So all we got left at this point, wide receivers, and we got 1 pick left here. So let's kind of talk through it. Team we got right now, we've got Joe Burrow and Tua. We got the big stacks with Cincinnati and with Miami. So I think the one thing that's missing from this bill right now is a Browns player. I mean, is he our priority? Elijah Moore's a guy I have not drafted once. And now that we've got the schedules out and we've got a Miami build, that's the only reason I'm entertaining it. But is there anybody else that you'd maybe be looking at here?
Yeah, and so honestly, I kind of like Elijah Moore. I think he's pretty much locked into the number 3 role in that offense. When we think about the Browns, they were 5th in neutral pass rate last year. They were 1st in total play volume. They also play faster under Deshaun Watson. So this is a team that overall I think is kind of undervalued by the market. A lot of it because of Deshaun Watson and just kind of the off field, him being a shitty person. You just don't want to kind of touch it, and how bad he looked last year. But I think this is one of those when we think of like, hey, range of outcomes, if this offense can be stronger, we know that they're going to play, we believe have strong data to suggest they're going to play fast, and Elijah Moore is going to be out there in the field. Oh, also Elijah Moore from a talent perspective is someone who we have liked in the past. So maybe if the right situation kind of comes to be, I think he's I think he's a fine pick. I won't say he's a great one, but he's definitely someone that I'm mixing in. And specifically when it is correlation.
Now, how about Andrei Iosivas? Is that a guy that you're thinking about as well? We're already invested pretty heavily in Cincinnati. I think a lot of people expect Jermaine Burton to be that wide receiver 3, but Yoshi showed some flashes last year. Or is that just too far into the weeds to even think about taking a guy like that?
I liked him before the Burton aspect.
Yeah, same.
So I am a fan of scrolling down and grabbing unknown players. If you use ETR rankings, you can actually see we have estimated player ownership on there that is based off all the drafts thus far and how often players are being drafted. As we get later into the summer, it'll be more reliable because we'll also have, more drafts have happened. That is when I really want to be trying to get players that are not being drafted. Kyra and Puka last year were not being drafted often, so they were even that much more valuable. Yoshi's the guy here, we'll keep an eye because we know Jermaine Burton has some off the field issues. If it sounds like there's maybe some, it may take him longer to get that role or whatever, maybe then I'm like, now I'm getting a very low owned player and one that kind of fits the build. But other guys that so this is definitely a place where if we don't get Elijah, I do want to try to draft someone that like is a bit off the board.
I want to say, I don't know if our producer pulled this one up yet, but Jeff Bell in the comments points out something. Odell with a Week 17 revenge game versus Cleveland. Hadn't really thought about that. I mean, I put a little bit of faith and a little bit of water into revenge games. It's not the first thing that I think about, but we do see it work out every now and then.
That's fair. It's fair. I'd say Rondale Moore is probably the other guy I'd be targeting.
Rondale Moore?
Yes. And we have the Washington guys right now, so that gives us a bit of a mini stack. I think Rondale Moore is one of those examples where, hey, new offense, new team, same coaching, familiarity with the coaching staff, but he's going to be out in the field. He's playing in a dome. He has this skill set to kind of break big plays that they can use in the right way. But it fell to us, Elijah Moore, clear pick, and we're happy.
So let's go ahead and walk through this one real quickly. Let me pull it up here.
Yeah.
I like this team. I'm very happy with this team, and I didn't expect to draft a bad team with you today, Justin. But you're just great at waiting for the value to fall to you, not forcing anything. just kind of letting everything fall into your lap. And that's exactly what we got. We got Tua working with our stack almost 3 rounds below ADP here. Love what we did with Cincinnati, where we've got T. Higgins and Chase Brown set up there. Christian McCaffrey, the easy pick at 101. Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams, Chase Brown, and J.K. Dobbins. That is behind Christian McCaffrey, just a running back room dripping with upside. Wide receivers, Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, Jahan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey, Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham, and Elijah Moore. And then a very strong tight end room here with Mark Andrews and Dallas Goedert. I'm going to pull up the board real quickly, but why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about this build, kind of what you liked, and what we could have done differently. I like I said, I'm happy with this team. I have no complaints or nitpicks.
I like it a lot. And I think one of the lessons kind of that we can take from this is understanding what's happening elsewhere in the draft. So with the Tua situation, we could have taken him with about a round of value. But if you look at where Tyreek went, he went in the 3 spot, and that person went Stroud and Caleb Williams before the Tua. So it was unlikely that person was going to take Tua. Only 2 people are ever fighting for the Tua stack, and it's the Tyreek and the Waddle. So if you can see that, hey, you have one of them, and you know that the other person already kind of has their 2 QBs and they're not going to be really in the market for Tua, that allows you to kind of wait on it. So us getting, and if we take a look at our 2v2, where's our, let's see, it is Dallas Goedert and Chase Brown. So like if we didn't get those, we would have taken Tua, and maybe we would have gotten Rico Dowdle or Kendra Miller. Like there's a pretty decent gap there between the Chase Brown and the Rico Dowdle and the Kendra Miller, or the Dallas Goedert and whatever tight end Benson or whoever would have been available. So there's opportunities to kind of, if that was our first QB, maybe we take Tua because you need the stack, but we already felt good with Burrow. We know we had backup options with Baker and other things available. So overall, I really like this team.
And you called that out at that point when we were at the 12-13 turn. I didn't even see Tua on the board. I just assumed he was gone. I mean, that was just an unbelievable value. I did not think that we'd be getting him there. But I feel like that just makes the entire draft so much better when you can get a quarterback that works perfectly with the build you have, falling 3 rounds below ADP. That just makes everything look that much prettier on the draft.
Yeah, I like this team a lot. And obviously you get a head start when you start with McCaffrey. And hey, I just realized too, we got both McCaffreys. Like this team is, we get the brothers. This works out well.
Yeah, where does that work into the rankings of things you should be attacking? Brother correlation. That's got to be somewhere up there, right?
Well, Saturday night before week 17, they have their kind of group family call. They give the motivation. So we're getting that kind of correlated motivational speeches there.
Yeah, I see our producer Joey Wright called that out as soon as we made the pick, and unbeknownst to both of us. But Justin, always a pleasure, man. Love getting the chance to talk with you. I feel like I walk away from every conversation just learning something new, feeling a little bit sharper and more confident in my future drafts. Let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter, where they can find all of your content over at ETR and all that good stuff.
I appreciate it. Always fun drafting with you as well, Dave. And any of my articles, content, drafts, all those will be at ETR. And for the most part, though, I'm also putting stuff out on Twitter. So just follow me at Justin Herzig. And if you ever kind of want to have a question or anything, just shoot me a tweet, tag me. Always happy to kind of chat.
Yeah, and of course, just go to your Twitter right now if you're watching the show and get those flashcards so you can brush up on the Week 17 correlation. I'm still sitting here with a tab open. I haven't memorized them all in the 48 hours that the schedules have been out, but I'm sure some of you have. But I want to thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm Dave Kluge. We're going to be here every Friday throughout the entire offseason at 11 a.m. Eastern. Next week, I'm going to be back with Football Guy's own James Brimacombe. And if you've ever seen James and I draft a team before, you know it's going to get way off the rails. We like to do some outside of the box stuff. And that's what makes this show so fun, is everybody has a different style and a different process. And every single week, we are going to dive into that a little bit. So be back next Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, as James Brimacombe and I try our best to take down Best Ball Mania.